planning and community participation through the use of Adobe's Photoshop image generator. So when looking into the realm of urban planning, we can see that a vital role as planners is being able to effectively communicate your project with the community. This communication is primarily done through the use of visuals. Our ideas must come across as clearly as possible to receive accurate feedback from citizens and the city. Without these clear depictions and explanations, this can hinder the relationship between development and the public, which can lead to miscommunication. But creating these effective visuals can be a timely task that can take away from other priorities. I'm looking to solve this challenge of creating time-efficient visuals to communicate a project clearly. I plan to cater to this issue through using artificial intelligence to help planners improve their public engagement by providing visuals that prove to be easier to understand and develop. So why use AI, as this is such a topic that can be fairly daunting to people? Well, fast and efficient solutions are hard to come by, but after looking more into the realm of artificial intelligence, I have discovered the wide range of opportunities that it can bring. While this can be an unfamiliar topic that many people shy away from, I want to show how AI is an abundant tool that can elevate any workspace. After researching more into AI, I have come across Adobe's Photoshop AI image generator and have learned about the capabilities this program has, especially for the world of urban design. I believe this tool will most effectively address the issue of miscommunication. This new tool brings public participation to the forefront of urban design by allowing citizens to visualize changes in an engaging way. This fill feature will allow designers to take the conversation outside of technical drawings and create an open space for people to interact with the proposed urban development. It has the capability to encourage more informed discussions, faster production, greater feedback, and the opportunity for contribution from the community. It will help shift away from abstract and complicated plans to something more relatable and insightful to all. Now, how exactly can we use this tool within AI planning? Photoshop's new AI generative fill allows you to add any image or element into an existing image. So let's look at an example. I found this article talking about using this tool as a planner. The image on the left is the starting photo of a street where the planner wanted to incorporate more of a streetscape. Using the generative fill tool within Photoshop, they selected the areas they wanted to alter and entered directional prompts and came up with this image on the right. They added in wider sidewalks, covered seating, and landscaping to make this street more appealing to pedestrians. This feature will allow planners to experiment with various designs and concepts to envision the impacts on the area. And after seeing these images, I was excited to try out the feature on my own to see what the process of using the generative fill is like. In order to try out the generative fill, I decided to use this image of a street within College Station. Let's say we're proposing to turn this street into a pedestrian street and create more walkable spaces. Typically, when presenting a project such as this to the public, a planner will gather images from the internet as examples or spend hours creating the site within the 3D visualization software. But by using generative fill, it allows designers to take a picture of the exact site and alter it for a relatable visual. So let's see my results after using Photoshop's AI tool on this image. This is the final product that I came up with. I used generative fill to remove the street and add in all sidewalk, a bench, as well as to generate the flower pots. This overall took me about 10 minutes to fully complete, but let's start from the beginning and I will run over how I took the starting image to the image that you see now. So here is our starting image opened up in Photoshop, and I wanted to begin editing by cleaning up the street and removing the stop sign since this is going to be turning into a pedestrian street. And a cool thing about generative fill is that it not only adds in features, but it can also detect and remove objects as well. So I'm going to begin by selecting the stop sign using the object selection. So once my object is selected, I'm going to click on Generative Fill in the bottom option bar, and when removing an object, you just have to leave the prompting text box empty and AI will recognize that you're wanting to remove the object. Now it is generating some options for us, and something to note is it does take a little bit to load. I sped this process up here a little bit. Okay, now that it's generated, it will give us 3 different options. So I'm running through the various options right now, trying to see which one fits best. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. I feel like it just matches the background and everything. Moving on to removing the street and adding in all sidewalk, I'm going to use the lasso selection tool. And here I'm just tracing out all of the area that I'm wanting to replace. Now that that area is selected, I'm going back to the generative tool and typing in a prompt this time. I decided to use the prompt pedestrian street to see what options it would give me with that. Finish typing that in, click done, and once again the generating process takes a bit. So it has generated 3 different variations for us of a pedestrian street. And when looking at these, I was not really loving these options, so I decided that I wanted to regenerate. And knowing what I know now, I could have just typed into that prompt box, but I decided to go ahead and completely delete that layer and start back over with my lasso tool, selecting the same area as before. Once it's selected, I will once again select Generative Fill, and now I'm going to be typing in pedestrian sidewalk with benches, adding a little more description into the prompt box and see what it will give me. Here are the new generated images that it gave us. This one, I felt like the sidewalk didn't match very well. These two, I didn't really like how many benches it had, so I decided to click generate again. It's going to rerun that exact same prompt and give us 3 more variations. And here we can see those 3 more images that it gave us, and I decided to go ahead and generate one more time to see if there was an image that I liked even better. And here we can see the 3 additional images that it generated. I ended up choosing this image because I felt like it smoothed out the sidewalk the best. Now I'm going back in with my lasso tool and selecting this area, and I want to add in a flower pot so it's not just all sidewalk. Here are our 3 variations for the flower pot, and I'm fairly impressed at how well it fits into the image and adds the shadowing and everything. So I'm running through the different variations and ended up going with this one. I felt like the flower pot looked a little too clear of an image, so I decided to add a little blur effect to it, make it fit in the image a little bit better. I wanted to add in a second flower pot so you can actually duplicate these fill layers. So I duplicated that first flower pot to add in a second one. And to make it blend just a little bit better, I'm going in with the eraser tool, cleaning it up a bit. This only took about a minute or so, and now we have our final image. So after going through that process, I want to talk a little bit more about troubleshooting and ways to improve use of the generative tool. Right off the bat, I believe that the tool is fairly user-friendly. I do have some prior experience with Photoshop, which I believe came to my advantage when using this tool, but you really only need basic knowledge of Photoshop to utilize this feature. Throughout the next several slides, I want to dive even further in the ways to maximize the use of this AI tool, and the two main topics I would like to discuss is prompting to achieve optimal images and the importance of using precision with the selection tool. The way you prompt within Generative Fill can really affect the images that you receive. So going back to the demonstration video, I had two different prompts I used when transforming the street into a pedestrian street. The first prompt I used was just pedestrian street, and as we can see from the images on the left, that I was not given exactly what I was looking for. It did not get rid of the street, but instead added in some crosswalks and people walking around. This was an error on my part because I did not specify that I wanted to remove the street, and the AI tool took this as if I were wanting to create a street that was much more pedestrian-centered. But when I went back with the new prompt, pedestrian sidewalk with benches, it gave me images that were much closer to what I was looking for. It removed the street completely and gave me an area that much better resembles a pedestrian street. Now I want to test the generative fill prompting even further and give much greater detail within the text box and see if this style of prompting will generate better images or not. So I went back to the original image and using the lasso tool, selected the same area, but this time I used the prompt, remove the street and put in all sidewalk and add 2 identical benches with people sitting on them. And as you can see, I got some pretty interesting results. The first image on the left looks very similar to our starting image. In the second image, the generative fill added in some grass and landscaping, which I thought was interesting since I did not mention anything about adding greenery. And the last image is pretty bizarre, but it seems to have taken my prompting words, remove the street, and completely took out all of the pavement. Overall, I would say this prompt seemed to be way less effective and definitely needs some reworking. So after researching more about tips for Photoshop AI prompting, I came across this article from Elegant Times that had a lot of advice to offer. This article was a full explanation on how to properly use the generative tool and all of its features, but most importantly, gave some very helpful information in regards to how to properly prompt. Within this particular section of the article, it explains how you should not be using instructional prompting. It suggests to avoid using words such as create, alter, or make, and instead use descriptive adjectives and nouns to see better results. They also say how Photoshop AI is different from other AI design tools because it does not require highly detailed or descriptive styling words. This was the opposite technique of what I had originally used when I chose a more descriptive prompt. Another article I found about AI prompting was published by Harvard University, and within that text, they explained how it can be better to start with a simpler prompt and build upon it as you go instead of including it all into one long prompt. Furthermore, when looking back at the prompt that I used, I realized I was incorporating too many instructional words such as remove, put in, and add. I needed to revise this prompt to cater to Photoshop's AI's language and make a more refined sentence. It also may be more beneficial to start with just prompting a sidewalk alone and then adding in benches and other features in another prompt instead of including them all in one. So I played around a little more with prompting and came up with a game plan on how I would most effectively transform the image with more prompts that were more refined. I took the advice from the articles and removed all instructional words and decided I would address each aspect separately instead of all together in one prompt. By separating them out, I could focus more on each feature, such as describing what type of seating I was looking for. Within the previous article from Elegant Times, they also explain how important the shape and size of your selection is. Smaller selections add smaller design elements, and a large selection will result in a larger object. This is just another way to give Photoshop more detail and explanation on the results you want. When I focused on being more intentional with the selection tools, I found that the generative fill produced better results. Within these images, I am showing the different results from different selection sizes and shapes. For both of these examples, I used the prompt bench to test the variations. The top two depict what happened when I selected a large and more general area, and it produced a bench that was way oversized and out of place for this area. In the bottom two images, I used the lasso selection tool to draw out and create a much more concise selection and ended up with a bench that was much more realistic and fitting for the image. Now that we have learned more on how to properly utilize the generative fill tool, I want to implement all of these practices and see if the process is any easier and if we can get a better result than before. I've reworked my prompt, so I'm now using multiple prompts that avoid using instructional words and paying closer attention to the selections I am making. I wanted to start off by cleaning up the sidewalk a little bit in order to clear any obstructions that would interfere with the sidewalk blending together. I cleared those in the same way that I cleared out the stop sign in the tutorial video by selecting them individually with the lasso tool and using generative fill without any text box. The object removal of this AI feature is very impressive as it always removes objects and blends in with the existing photos so well. I then used the lasso selection tool to draw over a greater piece of the sidewalk and street, and then used the prompt sidewalk. By selecting more of the sidewalk, it gave more room for the generative tool to work with and be able to seamlessly insert a new sidewalk. And here we can see the result of that sidewalk. This overall has been the best variation so far, and all I prompted was simply just sidewalk. It goes to show that Photoshop AI really doesn't need an elaborate prompt, as it will match the style of the photo you are using as long as you make sure to give it a proper selection. Next, I wanted to add in some seating and decided that I would try out a table this time. So using the lasso tool selection, I drew out the exact area where I wanted the table and even shaped the selection so an umbrella could fit at the table as well. And then in the generative fill box, I typed out table with chairs and umbrella, and the results were a perfect fitting table. I decided to add in another table and was curious if the AI tool could produce the same exact type of table again. So after another precise selection, I typed in the same prompt and received 3 very similar options to the previous table. This is a much simpler process than duplicating the layer as I did before, and it also gives more accurate results. The end result is 2 tables of the same type that fit into the existing scene very well. It's really nice that AI is able to detect the shadowing in the photo and replicate similar shadowing on the objects that it generates. I thought that was pretty cool, as this is such a small detail, but it could really throw off the whole photo. Next, in order to add some landscaping to the image, I wanted to add in flower pots. Same process was used here of selecting the area, and this time I prompted flower bed. And after inserting the first one, AI once again recognized this when generating the second and gave me 3 options that were very similar. And the end result is 2 cohesive flower beds, and I did not have to go through the process of duplicating the layer and trying to blend it in with the image using an eraser or brush, it already automatically blends in. And while this final image doesn't look too far off from that first AI image that I created in the step-by-step, I found that the process of creating this one to almost be seamless by incorporating the enhanced prompting and the precise selections. I felt I was able to customize more of this image as I was more comfortable with the AI tool. This could be an example of a visual that planners could use when collaborating with the public. The public are able to visualize the projects with the planner and have better communication when expressing their thoughts and opinions. This overall took about 15 minutes to fully complete this image, and I would say this is a fairly quick and cost-effective task that could easily be implemented within planning firms. Now I'm wanting to show another example of implementing the generative tool within urban planning and demonstrate the ease of using this tool. Planners can further use it to create multiple scenes and designs all within the same image. Photoshop, since it's already a common software used by planners, adding the implementation of the AI tool will only enhance drawings and help create visually pleasing images. And this, in return, their work can be understood by a wider audience. So here I have an image of a street that's on campus here at Texas A&M, and I'm wanting to transform it. I am planning on turning this street into a more walkable and bicycle-friendly street. As a planner, I am able to visualize the project in my head, and right away I can quickly draw up something using the AI tool and even make quick changes if I'm unhappy with the final results. Okay, so I wanted to start this editing process with a little bit of a test for AI. And after learning more about this tool, I know that it is most effectively used when you edit the photo in increments, separating out the prompts and keeping them simple. But here I wanted to test what image I would get by selecting the road and using the prompt pedestrian streets with bike lanes. This was mostly just for fun, but I was slightly curious what AI would generate using a prompt such as this. Okay, and here is that result we got from using that prompt, and as we can see, what we got seems to be like a weirdly painted street, almost as if they were trying to create a bike lane or creating bike symbols on the street. Either way, it is a little funky, which is just as expected since the generative tool doesn't create as effective images with those higher detail prompts and less precise selected areas, since we did select quite a large area of the image. It is looking for more precision and less generalization. And although while it could be really convenient for this tool to change the image all at once, I think being able to separate the prompt allows for more customization and preference, which I think in the long run is better because you're able to choose the exact area you want to insert the object and give more description on that specific feature. Okay, so now let's actually get into editing this image. Reflecting back on my plan that I mentioned for this image, I am wanting a more pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly, walkable area on this street. So I'm thinking of taking out some of the street to allow for more sidewalk and some bike lanes. So I'm going to begin by extending the sidewalk on the left side of the photo. And in order to do this, I carved a piece of both the street and sidewalk within my selection, and I wanted to focus on keeping my prompt short and sweet, and the prompt I went with was simply just sidewalk. I will say, while using this tool, I have to make sure to focus on not using instructional words, because when typing this prompt, I really wanted to say something like add more sidewalk or make sidewalk wider. But I have to remind myself that less is more when it comes to the Photoshop AI feature. Okay, and here are the 3 generated options that it gave me to use. And I will say right off the bat, looking at these, all 3 of them blend in very well with the image. The second 2 options are more of what I was looking for, as they are more of an actual sidewalk. And as you can see, the first option is not really a sidewalk at all. But mistakes like this is pretty common when using the tool, where you will have 1 or 2 of the images that are a little off, but I have found that there is always at least 1 image that will successfully fit in and meet the requirements I'm looking for. And if not, it is important to know that the option to regenerate is always there. And with that, you do not have to go in and reselect using the lasso tool or anything, because it will use the previous selected area. I did end up choosing option number 3. I felt that it best fit my vision and best matched with the existing sidewalk overall in comparison to the other 2 options. However, it did need a bit of cleaning up. As you can see, that sidewalk had some existing trash cans and what seems to be a hole for drainage on it that I did not want in the photo. So I went in and removed those by individually selecting each one with the lasso tool, using the generative fill tool, and leaving the prompt box blank. And it took those right out. It almost takes no time at all to clean up parts of the photo such as this, and the bottom image is the result of the cleaning up. Okay, so the next part for my vision on this image is I'm wanting to turn the remaining part of the street into bike lanes and turn the street into a bike-only street with no vehicles on it. So I began creating this by focusing my selection right along the edges of the sidewalk. Since I don't really want the bike lanes to merge into the sidewalk, I found that it's important to recognize when to keep selections sharp to the edge and when to allow a little more selection into other elements. For example, when I was creating the sidewalk, I wanted to make sure to include the existing sidewalk so it could seamlessly blend out. But in a scenario like this, I want to separate out the bike lanes from the sidewalk. So after I make my selection, I used the generative fill and I used the prompt bike lane, this time keeping it simple. After my bike lane had generated, I noticed there were some objects in the background that looked a little bit out of place, as you can see in that bottom image. So I went ahead and cleaned those up by removing them using the generative fill tool and leaving the prompt blank empty. And after running the generator with that prompt, here are the 3 options for a bike lane that it gave me. I found that the generative tool does have a tougher time when creating bike lanes for some reason. It will often create these uneven lines that we see in option 2, or it will have trouble creating the bike symbol such as we see in option 3. However, option 1 has pretty straight and clear lines, and I felt all 3 of them pretty well blended in nicely with the rest of the image, and I liked how they contained the shadowing that was casted by the trees above. But in the end, I of course ended up choosing the first option, as it is overall the best out of the 3 and resembles a bike lane the closest. Okay, let's look at the progress that we've made so far. We've added in the extended sidewalk, we've added in bike lanes, and we've gone in and cleaned up parts of the image. We have a pretty successful image so far, and I think this would be a great image to stop at, especially for if you're making just a quick visual. But I'm still wanting to add some type of landscaping along the sidewalk to create a better barrier between the pedestrians and the bicycles. I also think that adding in a little landscaping will create an overall more lively area, as it can be a little dark with these trees providing so much shade above. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in some greenery to this image. So to start out adding in landscaping, I went ahead using my lasso selection tool and selected the edge of the sidewalk with the tool, and going into the street a little bit, but being cautious on not making the selection too big where the plants would be in the way of the bike lane, but still enough room for plants. So here I used the prompt flower bed and went ahead and generated, and we can see what we got in the next slide. Here I've included just a few of the variations I was given for the flower bed. I did regenerate this one a couple of times, mostly because I was intrigued to see the other options that it would give me. I felt as though almost all of the options I saw were accurate and very realistic looking. These are the three that I felt best fit within the rest of the image and the vision I was going for. But overall, I did end up choosing option 1 because I think it gave the simplest design and it wasn't taking away too much from the rest of the photo. And here, once again, I am impressed at how it is able to cast the shadowing over top of the flowers. AI really does so much of the work for you in terms of creating an image that is very realistic. Okay, and now here we have our final product after turning this street into having an extended sidewalk and bike lanes and separating out with a little bit of landscaping. And as you can see, I did end up adding a person walking along the sidewalk and someone riding their bike within the bike lane to make the visual more realistic and relatable. This visual overall took me about 10 minutes to complete, and once again, I believe this is significantly faster than having to create visuals through 3D software, and it is definitely more relatable than pulling example images from the web. Viewers of this image that are familiar with this space are now better able to envision themselves here. After all of that, I want to share my Photoshop's AI generative fill key takeaways. So I believe using the AI generative fill to quickly and effectively portray planning efforts will greatly increase public engagement and inclusivity. These simple images can display a planner's vision as well as help the planner to come up with practical solutions on their own. It provides a quicker, cheaper, and more approachable alternative to traditional 3D visualization programs, making the communication between planner and public more effective and welcoming. I also want to mention some key factors to keep in mind while you're implementing the generative fill is to avoid instructional writing within the prompting, and it is easier to prompt one element at a time. Also to remember that Photoshop will not only edit the area you tell it to, so making sure to keep selections precise will help generate successful images. And you should remember that you can always regenerate using the same or new prompt if you are not satisfied with your results. Overall, I think that AI can greatly help urban planners make their work more inclusive, more accessible, and especially more impactful. I'm excited to see how AI will become incorporated within the urban planning world in the future. Through the process of learning more about Adobe's Photoshop generative fill, I can attest that incorporating AI within planning can be very successful and save a lot of time. I plan to continue to educate myself about AI and even hopefully spread this knowledge within the field of my work. The first obstacle of learning more about AI is getting over the fear of or feeling of it being overwhelming. I believe artificial intelligence is here to stay, and it's important that we stay up to date with the latest and greatest technology.